Hello, greeting from Warsaw. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to share my knowledge, experiences, and emotion with you. My name is Mariusz Jaworski, and I'm Associate Professor at Medical University of Warsaw. In my speech, I'm going to continue the topic that Professor Jana Gottlieb talked about. However, I would like to touch on public health in the context of mental health. I also work at the Warsaw City Hall. Therefore, in my speech, I will refer to two perspectives. The first is related to the science, psychology, and the second one is related to the local authority. The aim of my speech is to present the subject of mental health in the context of the war in Ukraine. How war affects our mental health? What are the changes in mental health? What are the challenges for us? What action should be taken to improve mental health? In this context, in the context of these three questions, I have divided my presentation in three parts. The first part is related to very brief introduction. Second part is concentrate on the changes. And the third part, last part, is related to the challenges. Before we start talking about the mental health, we have to ask ourselves, what is health? How can health be defined? Is health an equal important value for every human being? According to World Health Organization, health is not just about disease or the lack of it. It is more than it. It is something more. On the World Health Organization website, we can read that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. It should be noted that the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, without distinction of race, religious, political beliefs, economic, or social condition. I would like to stress that mental health is central to the human, social, and economic capital of nation, and it should therefore be considered as an integral and essential part of other public policy areas, such as human rights, social care, education, and employment. Of course, we can say that mental health is the emotional and spiritual resilience which allow us to enjoy life and to survive pain, disappointment, and sadness. Is it a positive sense of well-being and an underlying belief in our own and others' dignity and worth? So this is why I put on this slide great sentence which was created by World Health Organization in 2005. There is no health without mental health. And I would like that we keep this sentence in our mind during my speech today. Okay, so when talking about the public mental health, we have to mention three very important dimensions. First, promoting mental well-being. Second, preventing mental ill. And third, treatment and recovery. These three dimensions are interconnected. They have a lot in common. Public mental health concerns each of us, but also the entire community in which we live. We should be responsible for our health and help people who live in our environment. We should strive to strengthen our mental health in everyday situation, especially in a specific situation like a crisis. So let's take a look at the changes. Let's look at our reality here and now and its impact on our health. Let's come back in our mind. It is February 23rd, 2022, and the world is going to sleep. It's night. Nobody expects his or her to wake up and see the bad news. In the morning, there was information about the war in the media. What shock, disbelief, denial, fear, anger. On Tuesday, February 24, 2022, many people experienced these emotions. On that day, the peace in Europe was disturbed. The sense of security in Europe was disturbed. There were questions about the future. It was so difficult to carry out everyday tasks. It was very difficult to concentrate on the task. The thought that there is a war a few kilometers away is terrifying. This news upset our psychological balance. I remember that I have classes with students that day, and 5 minutes before the class, I found out about the war. That day, my classes were about the healthy lifestyle, psychological aspect. We talked about healthy eating, taking care of physical activity, etc. But it was really hard to stay concentrate on this topic. There was only one thought in our mind. And now come back to the psychology and look at the slide and referring to Maslow pyramids. It should be emphasized that the need of security is one of the key needs when we talk about our needs in this context. This need allows us to meet other needs. On the day the war started, our sense of security was disturbed. Plans and the future were questioned. As happened with COVID-19, the compulsive need to keep up with the Russian invasion is taking a toll on our mental health. The crisis in Ukraine has created a brain-tangling complexity for anyone trying to understand what is going on. Now, doom scrolling is back in a way not seen since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Cambridge Dictionary, we can define doom scrolling as an activity of spending a lot of time looking at your phone, your computer, and reading bad or negative news stories. The part of this sentence, bad or negative news stories, is very important in the case of this definition, because doom scrolling is concentrate only on bad and negative news. What is more, according to mental health experts, constant engagement with bad or negative news, while doom scrolling affects mental health in terms of increased anxiety and sleeplessness that should not be ignored. What happened? People were looking at the phone and the computer all the time. Every now and then, people were looking for information about the war in Ukraine. New information appeared with every minute. Much of information that appeared was fake. However, even it was true or false, the effect was the same. Negative emotion intensified. What is more, the anxiety level was very, very high. People had to mobilize personality resources that would allow them to deal with reality, with the situation where we are now. For many people, checking information about the war was the first activity every morning after waking up. Of course, it's not a question of what happened on a day-to-day basis, but hour by hour. Situation was very, very dynamic. Many people check new information about the war in the evening, right before going to sleep. This had an impact of their sleeping quality. They couldn't sleep. Their negative emotion intensified. The emotional stress was at its maximum. So it has a negative impact on our mental health. When we refer to psychology, we can talk about the cognitive theory of anxiety, because this cognitive theory suggests that it is a response to threat, which can be entirely rational, and certainly plays a role in this context. It is a part of the motivation underlying behaviors, for example, such as doom scrolling, the urge to understand the nature of the threat, how likely it is, what the consequences might be, how you might cope, and who may be able to help. UNICEF has reported that the grinding conflict in eastern Ukraine is increasingly affecting the mental health of boys and girls, causing, for example, nightmares, social isolation, and panic attacks. On this slide, you can see what the Ukrainian girls say about their current reality, their current situation. The word of children in Ukraine has completely changed. Everything has changed just in 1 minute, in few seconds. They had to adopt the new reality. The 15-year-old girl said, "In a split second there was an explosion. All I remember is that my ears were buzzing, and I saw a yellow line of fire, then red, orange, and fragments." I think it is hard to imagine what these children are feeling. What is more, night spent in the dark basement have only made it worse. In a matter of minutes, the reality completely changed. There was one most important aim. I must survive. Let's look at the sentence of 15-year-old girl. When you hear a shot, you run to the basement, hide, and wait for explosion. You need to survive while you run to the basement, and then you need to survive in the basement. They must find inner strength to face the situation. However, this situation is not without its impact on their mental health. Russian invasion of Ukraine suddenly changed the world. Many people have to start living from day to day. However, they don't lose hope. When I spoke with the student from Ukraine, she said that she is now saved. Her house was destroyed. Her house in Ukraine was destroyed. But despite this, she did not lose hope and say that someday they will rebuild the houses they lost in the future. Let's look at the sentence on the slide. Perhaps someday we will be able to do it, but until the war is over, we live a day-to-day existence. In this sentence, we see hope. Let's look at the mental health in a bit different way, because it should be noted that war also affects the mental health of people who are currently undergoing therapy. Some patients, during psychological or different types of consultation, report the need to talk about the current situation in Europe and its impact on their mental state. For example, patients with eating disorder are a very specific group. Patients with eating disorders are concerned. They are concerned about the future of their therapy. What will happen to them? Patients with chronic disease have similar concerns. Now let's look at challenges. What are the biggest challenges at the moment? It should be noted that war causes physical, psychological, social, and ecological destruction. What is more, war causes people to flee in research of security and safety. For these people, violence and insecurity become everyday experiences. The occurrence of a wide variety of psychological symptoms and syndromes in the population in the conflict situation is widely documented. In the context on the war-related consequences, as well as public challenges, 5 important issues should be mentioned. Symptoms of depression, symptoms of anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorders, symptoms of psychotism, and phobia. Of course, it should be noted that the number of post-traumatic symptoms is also influenced by the degree and the number of war and post-war stressors. The number of post-traumatic symptoms is larger than war or post-war stressor are more numerous, affecting all aspects of everyday life. In cases of severe traumatization and high exposure to everyday war or post-war stressor, increased feeling of helplessness and lack of control over one's own life can be observed. As we can see on this slide, depression is one of the most frequent psychiatric disorders, comorbid with post-traumatic stress disorders. We know that mood disorder can develop as a complicated response to the loss associated with the traumatic event. Next symptoms, this is a symptoms of psychoticism. The traumas are relatively frequent. A few recent studies have shown that about 18% of patients with post-traumatic stress disorders, also have psychotic symptoms. Also, we can observe the phobia symptoms. Phobias are the most frequent anxiety disorder comorbid with post-traumatic symptoms in post-traumatized victims. Both disorders share the reactive component, but it is possible that some common underlying neurophysiological mechanisms, which are less susceptible to the level of everyday stress, are also at play. Hence, it's not doubted that population in war and conflict situation should receive mental health care as a part of total relief, rehabilitation, and reconstruction process. Nowadays, taking care of public health is a challenge for Europe. In Europe, we need to take strategic action to reduce the negative impact of war on public mental health. In this context, any form of psychological support and psychological and physical support are required for minimization the effect of war-related traumas. In Warsaw, the buses have Ukrainian flags. There are special information points for refugees, where refugees can receive help. A lot of information is Ukrainian languages. There are special points for psychological support, but not only. This is only part of activities that are undertaken in the Warsaw, but all these activities are one aim at minimizing the effects of war-related traumas. I would like to say that public mental health is a challenge for us. We must work together to restore mental balance and minimize the trauma associated with the war. Together, we can do more. And I would like to finish my speech with this sentence, and please keep it in your mind. Thank you very much for your attention. and feel free to ask if you have any question. Thank you very much.